Imagine this. Sexually explicit books, so graphic that even adults cringe at reading them aloud, are sitting in your child's school library. And when responsible parents try to protect their children, woke activists smear them as book banners. Let's be clear, this isn't about banning books. It's about protecting our kids from content that no child should be exposed to. But now, these activists are pushing laws to silence parents and keep sexually explicit material in schools. They've even dragged this fight to a Senate hearing. What you're about to hear will make your jaw drop. Now, take a listen to what these so-called books really contain. Warning, what you're about to hear is disturbing. Please put on your headphones and listen to yourself to avoid your kids overhearing.
I confess I'm a little confused, and I appreciate the argument or discussion that we've been having, but for me it's a little too conceptual or, I don't know, metaphysical or theological or whatever you want to call it. I want to try to understand what you're asking us to do. Let's take two books that have been much discussed. The first one is called All Boys Aren't Blue, and I will quote from it. I put some lube on and got him on his knees, and I began to slide into him from behind. I pulled out of him and kissed him while he masturbated. He asked me to turn over while he slipped a condom on himself. This was my ass, and I was struggling to imagine someone inside me. He got on top and slowly inserted himself into me. It was the worst pain I think I have ever felt in my life. Eventually, I felt a mix of pleasure with the pain. Close quote. All Boys Aren't Blue. The second is another much discussed book. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's called Genderqueer. Okay? Let me read an excerpt from that. Quote, I got a new strap-on harness today. I can't wait to put it on you. It will fit my favorite dildo perfectly. You're going to look so hot. I can't wait to have your cock in my mouth. I'm going to give you the blowjob of your life. Then I want you inside of me. End quote.
Did you hear that? These are explicit sex scenes, read aloud in front of lawmakers, graphic, obscene content. And yet these same books are sitting in school libraries, ready for your kids to pick up. Books like All Boys Aren't Blue and Genderqueer, banned in multiple states because parents are outraged. But instead of listening to parents, these woke activists are trying to force these books into every school across the country. Why? Because apparently, protecting kids from pornography is now labeled as censorship. And here's the worst part. Activists claim you, the parents, should have no say in what your child reads. That's right, they want to leave the decision up to librarians, and they're telling lawmakers that you shouldn't interfere. How insane is that? Let's dive deeper. Senator Kennedy cuts through the nonsense, asking the question every parent in America is asking: who gets to decide what's appropriate for our kids?
Now, Mr. Secretary, what are you asking us to do? Are you suggesting that only librarians should decide whether the two books that I just referenced should be available to kids? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay. Tell me what you're saying.
Well, first of all, there's this...
Don't give me a speech. Tell me what you're asking me to do.
With all due respect, Senator, the words you spoke are disturbing, especially coming out of your mouth is very disturbing. But I would also tell you that we're not advocating for kids to read porn, to Senator Booker's point.
What are you advocating for?
We are advocating for parents, random parents, not to have the ability, under the guise of keeping kids safe, to try and challenge the world view of every single manner on these issues.
You're getting conceptual game.
I'm not getting conceptual.
Well,
I'm saying
yes,
that
you are. Yes, you are. Because I want to know what you're recommending. It sounds to me like what some of you are saying, the librarians should decide who gets to see that book?
I'm saying when individual parents are allowed to make a decision of where that line is, and To Kill a Mockingbird, which involves a rape scene, should that book be pulled from our libraries? I think it becomes a slippery slope.
I think you ought to think about it a little bit more before you come here.
I've thought about,
if
Senator,
you're going to propose something, you ought to be able, in 30 seconds, to be able to explain what you're asking us to do.
Look at how they dodge the question. Senator Kennedy is asking a simple, direct question. Who decides if this obscene content is appropriate for children? And they can't give a straight answer. Why? Because deep down, they know parents have the right to protect their kids, but instead of respecting that, they want librarians to have all the power. And notice how Illinois Secretary of State Alexi Giannoulias tries to twist it, as if parents asking to protect their children somehow threatens freedom. What freedom is he talking about? Freedom to expose kids to graphic sexual content. What planet is this guy from? He tried to defend his state's decision to keep these books at schools under the guise of the so-called Right to Read Act. But the majority of Americans have different opinions. According to a 2022 poll by Rasmussen Reports, 69% of Americans oppose sexually explicit books in school libraries, and 89% agree that parents should be informed about what's taught to their kids. Clearly, Americans want transparency. Now let's move on to the woke activists who are fighting to keep these books in your child's library. You won't believe the mental gymnastics they pull to justify this nonsense.
Ms. Kelly, what do you understand? Well, let me skip you for a second. Mr. Cameron, tell me what you're proposing.
It's pronounced mix.
Mix? Is that how would you like me to refer to you?
Senator, your definition of sexual is synonymous with LGBTQ identity.
I'm not asking you that. I'm asking you to tell me you read those two excerpts.
Genderqueer.
Do you think that, are you asking that only librarians and not parents have any say in whether minors can read those books? Is that what you're saying?
Genderqueer has never been in my school library, so it's never been banned.
Well, suppose it was. Should it be up just to the librarian, or should parents have a say?
There should be facilitation of collaboration between students,
parents
and
have a say?
Parents should be working with students and educators to be making decisions, because students are...
And who decides ultimately, the librarian, or do you take a vote, or who takes the vote?
Book review committees in the community in my school district.
You want a committee to decide?
There are committees.
Okay. Well, I'm asking you, how do we decide whether the two books that I just referenced should be available in the library? What would you, if you were running things, what would you do?
All Boys Aren't Blue, the scene you mentioned, is about sexual abuse.
I know what it's about.
It's not
What would you do in terms of making the books available? Would you say anybody can see them, or they have to be in a special session?
Students who do not read books like All Boys Aren't Blue cannot learn what is appropriate.
I understand that.
They cannot learn.
I understand, but none of you
abuse.
want to.
Are you kidding me? They're actually saying that kids need these explicit books to understand abuse? That's right. This activist wants kids to learn about sexuality through pornographic content in their school library. It's beyond woke. It's pure insanity. And when Senator Kennedy presses them, what do they suggest? Committees, bureaucrats, anyone but parents. That's the game here. Cut parents out of the equation, hand control to book committees and woke activists, and pretend it's all about education. But parents see right through this charade.
You come here and you say censorship is bad, and of course it's bad. But the obvious response is, okay, you heard the books we're talking about. Okay, we're not talking about Catcher in the Rye. So tell me what you want, who gets to decide. And all I've heard is the librarians. And parents have nothing to do with it. And if that's your response, what planet did you just parachute in from?
Parents, Senator...
Or what country, more appropriately? This is not China.
Parents, Senator, for all due respect, parents absolutely have a say. My parents were immigrants, came to this country. We never checked out books without our parents seeing what books we were reading. They encouraged us to read books.
Mr. Secretary, I understand this is good for your politics back home.
It's got nothing to do with my politics. My bill is passed.
Of course it does. It has everything to do with your politics.
I'm here to...
But you came here with a problem, and I'm trying to understand the solution, and you don't have one.
We solved the solution.
Other than to tell us that we don't agree with you, we'll be on the wrong side of history.
We solved the problem in Illinois. We fixed it. Because we
well, there are others you could work on.
Well, that's why I'm
out
here
of
to help.
time. Thank
I'm
you,
help-
Mr. Chairman.
This is the kind of twisted logic we're up against. They'll accuse you of being a book banner. They'll say you're stifling freedom, but let's call it what it is. Keeping pornographic content away from kids is common sense. What these activists are pushing is dangerous. And if parents don't stand up now, these explicit books will keep creeping into schools, and your child will be the one paying the price. Thankfully, many states are fighting back. In Virginia, Governor Glenn Youngkin passed a law that gives parents the right to know when explicit content is being used in schools. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis signed the Parental Rights in Education bill, banning inappropriate sexual content in classrooms for young kids. These are the leaders taking real action to protect children. If you're concerned about what's being taught and given to your kids, now is the time to speak up. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video. Parental rights are not just important, they're essential. Stand up for your children before it's too late.